They laughed at a number, not an idea. $1,700. In Raleigh's glass and brick tech corridor, that sum is what a company like Nova Forge spends on ergonomic chairs for a single meeting room. On Fridays, Eli's team burned more than that on cold brew and tapas. Still, when the slide with MVP budget, $1,700, appeared, I watched the temperature in the product strategy room drop a degree. The junior PMs leaned back as if an invisible cue had fired. One nudged the other and hid a grin behind his cup. Eli, head of product innovation by charisma and golf, twirled a pen like a conductor about to mute a section of the orchestra. "Let me get this straight," he said, loud enough for the hallway. "We're doing AI on a thrift store budget because Lauren found magic in clicks?" I did not tighten my jaw. 12 years in this building had taught me that restraint is armor. "Not magic," I said evenly. "Patterns. Micro-interactions that reveal intent before action. A small test proves the lift. Then we scale." He smiled, the kind of smile that always found its audience. "PowerPoint teacher energy," he said, and laughter, forced, brittle, but laughter rippled around the table. In an open-plan office where praise was public and criticism was theater, that line had rehearsed timing. I advanced the deck anyway. Retention curves, ROC metrics, implementation sequence. They didn't challenge a single number because they couldn't. The data sang. They just decided not to listen. In most companies, vision arrives dressed as decibels. At Nova Forge, we'd started mistaking loud for right. Raleigh had changed in the decade since my first badge photo, startups swelling, exits intoxicating the air. But inside these walls, the org chart calcified around a story. Innovation looks like whoever tells it best over burgers after 9 holes. I spoke with slides and precision. I was not invited to the course. After the meeting, the subtle erasures began. My keycard glitched at the executive conference room. The product stand-up moved to 8:30, exactly when my documented EU partner call happened every Tuesday. "Adaptability is key in innovation," Eli said, ceramic mug raised in faux collegiality, as if adaptability meant time travel. By week 3, I was off the strategy slack and my analytics permissions were pending security review. Legacy documentation bloomed on my task list like mold in a damp closet. If you want someone to quit, bury them alive under the respectable. Monica from HR delivered the script with the serenity of someone who keeps a succulent alive under fluorescent lights. "We've had concerns about collaboration," she said, hands folded like a chapel on the desk. "Some feel you're resistant to new leadership directions." "I presented one proposal once," I said, careful, calm. "It's not frequency. It's attitude. We need enthusiasm for the collective vision." Collective vision is what companies say when they want an individual to stop having one. 2 days later, Derek appeared at my desk. 23. Boot camp twill backpack. A man who still said awesome like punctuation. "Eli wants me to take over user behavior analytics," he chirped, cheeks pinking as he realized he was delivering bad news disguised as opportunity. "He said you could show me the ropes before you transition." Transition. A word that did not sting. It clarified. I pulled up dashboards. I showed him the scaffolding I had built. I wrote a clean, kind handover on my personal laptop because there are 2 kinds of power, the one that humiliates and the one that documents. He struggled a little because this work looks like magic if you don't live in the data long enough to hear it breathe. I made it simple. I do not sabotage even when invited. That night, I stayed late. The building empties after 6. The open floor hums like a beehive discovering winter. I laid the paperwork on my desk. The employment agreement with its tight clauses and its tiny oxygen pockets. In Section 3.2.4, a carve-out that most people skim. Ideas, concepts, or proposals formally rejected by the company without material financial investment shall not be considered company property, provided the employee can demonstrate independent creation prior to formal submission. The sentence hit like a key finding its lock. They had rejected it in a meeting with witnesses. They had invested nothing. I had sketches time-stamped on my iPad from an Asheville weekend. Email threads to my mentor predating the deck by weeks. Analytics runs executed from subscriptions in my name, on my time, in my home. Work for hire is a fortress, but a formal rejection opens a door in the wall large enough to walk through carrying your life. At 11:20 p.m. I wrote the certification on my phone, thumb steady. I, Lauren Pierce, certify. The words were clinical, clean, inevitable. I sent it to myself, to a lawyer, to a time-stamping service that never sleeps. Overkill to some, oxygen to me. When the cleaning vacuum moaned past my chair, Maria paused, kind eyes catching my face. Working late again, Miss Lauren. Last time. They don't know what they lose, she said. You always say hello. It is a small thing to be seen by the person who sees everything. Eli looked through Maria like she was furniture. Data has patterns long before graphs. I packed that night the way you pack a life you refuse to let them treat like a crime scene. The cactus I watered on Tuesdays. The mug from our first launch party back when we celebrated outcomes, not optics. A USB labeled User Behavior V1.0 Personal, I had almost forgotten, insurance from earlier, better versions of leadership. The server room throbbed beyond the drywall like a heart someone else owned. I took only what was mine. On the drive home, the number kept time on the steering wheel. $1,700, the price of a laptop upgrade. The price of not being here anymore. You can be angry at arrogance, but anger isn't a plan. Plans have line items. In the morning, I wrote the resignation. 2 weeks, professional, unspectacular. Monica smiled in relief, the problem solving itself. Eli didn't reply. I didn't expect him to. People who conflate interruption with intelligence do not see the people who refuse to be erased. Raleigh's sky was the color of a system prompt when I parked and went back upstairs. I trained Derek again. I filed documentation they had asked for, even though they had already decided it was all I was good for. I left things better than I found them, because the way you leave is the way you arrive somewhere else. That evening, I walked the floor alone one last time. The seats where people had looked away when the joke landed, the conference room where the data had sung and politics had turned down the volume. Eli's glass office, motivational poster urging us to think boldly, a bromide that had been used to strangle more ideas than it ever birthed. In the elevator, I thought of something my mentor used to say. Pattern recognition is not about what stands out. It's about what repeats. For months, the pattern of this place had been simple. Who talks loudest, ships least, and still gets promoted. Past actions predict future outcomes. It is the first rule of behavior science and the last lesson of corporate life. I parked in my garage at 12:23 a.m. and opened my banking app. There it was. The number. 1,700. A line that would have bought Nova Forge a shot at owning what I'd built. A line they laughed at. I closed the app and opened a new document. Tasks for day 1. Incorporation, domain registration, repo scaffolding, cap table skeleton, outreach list. The hum in my ears receded. Something else replaced it. Not rage, not triumph. The click of a gear seating into place. In the morning, I would file an LLC. In a week, I would stand behind a 6-foot folding table at a convention center 2 states away and tell a managing partner that I could see what her portfolio's churn rate would look like 3 weeks before it happened. In 3 weeks, I would stand in a different conference room across a different kind of table and show partners that the cheapest proposal in Raleigh could mint money in Austin. For now, I set the cactus on my kitchen windowsill and watched the streetlights paint slow rectangles across the counter. Everyone thinks the drama is the insult in the room, the line that made the interns laugh. The real drama is quieter. It's a clause hidden in a sea of legalese. It's a USB you forgot you labeled. It's the moment you realize you do not need permission to rescue your own work from other people's fear. The hallway cameras have that final footage. A woman leaving a building with a tidy box, no witnesses except the night shift and the servers. It doesn't make good theater. It makes a better beginning. The door clicked behind me, final, but not harsh. Somewhere 2 floors up from where I used to sit, a screensaver rotated through mountain vistas, the office counting me as present until it realized, sometime tomorrow, that I had become part of the building's past. It would take them longer to realize I had taken nothing and everything with me, nothing they could sue over, everything they had thrown away. 1,700. I said it out loud once to hear how unremarkable it sounded. Then I wrote it at the top of my new notebook and drew a small box next to it. Beside the box, I wrote the word I knew I would be checking off soon enough. Resignation letters are meant to be sterile, almost invisible. 2 sentences, date stamped, signed, and archived by an HR system that files people away as if they were expired passwords. Mine was no different. Please accept this as formal notice of my resignation. My last day will be no accusations, no flames. Just the quiet closing of a door. But beneath that still surface, a storm brewed. I wasn't leaving with nothing. I was leaving with an algorithm, a set of patterns invisible to those who thought innovation lived in golf jokes and loud voices. Nova Forge had rejected it, formally on the record. Section 3.2.4 had become my parachute. Now I would test whether it could be wings. The last night was a ritual. I walked the office with the reverence of a mourner. The cactus came home, the USB drive with Behavior v1.0 slipped into the pocket where I kept my passport. Every file I exported carried timestamps older than the meeting where Eli sneered. I had gathered enough breadcrumbs to prove the idea was mine alone. The building hummed with servers, oblivious, as if mocking the idea that its memory would outlast mine. I wasn't sabotaging, wasn't stealing. I was documenting, preserving. A historian of my own dismissal. That night I typed a line into my phone. Intellectual property certification. The words felt like an oath. Screenshots, blockchain stamps, lawyer copies. Overkill? Maybe, but in corporate warfare, paper trails are both sword and shield. Maria, pushing her vacuum, had said I always remembered her name. Eli hadn't. That single observation lodged itself like prophecy. People who overlook names also overlook ideas. The pattern was there all along. The morning after I resigned, I bought a domain name, Neuralink. The word had the texture I wanted, neural for patterns, link for connection. I filed incorporation papers with the state of Texas, not North Carolina. Raleigh had rejected me. Austin would become my forge. I drained $1,700 from my personal savings, precisely the number that had once drawn laughter, to pay registration fees, a cheap flight to Austin, and a demo booth at a startup expo. The Austin Convention Center smelled of ambition and overpriced coffee. Founders pitched like street preachers, eyes wide with desperation. I didn't chase anyone. I set up my folding table between a blockchain meal kit startup and an app promising to revolutionize dog walking. My screen glowed with a live demo of predictive analytics running on anonymized datasets. Not what users had done, but what they would do next. patterns scrolling like a secret language. That's when Patricia Yang stopped. Managing partner at Apex Ventures, she carried the aura of someone who'd seen every pitch and dismissed most of them. Her gaze landed on my monitor before it landed on me. "What am I looking at?" she asked. "The difference between guessing what users want and knowing it," I replied, steady though my pulse thundered. She asked to see the code. I showed her. For 40 minutes, she carved into my assumptions with the precision of a surgeon. Accuracy rates, scalability, edge cases. I answered each question because I had lived with this algorithm long enough that it had colonized my dreams. Not Nova Forge's data, never that. Public sets, volunteer betas, friends at universities who owed me favors. Clean, defensible, mine. You built this alone? The concept and core algorithm, yes. 2 developers joined after Nova Forge laid them off. I smiled. They work for equity now. They believe. Patricia tilted her head, lips curling into the ghost of a smile. Seed round? I was ready. $2 million at a $12 million pre-money valuation. That gives us 18 months of runway. 3 hires. Market proof. She texted her team as I spoke. Present to the partnership Monday. 9 a.m. I nodded like my life wasn't being rewritten in real time. I'll be there? Monday morning arrived bright, Austin sunlight bouncing off glass towers. I wore the navy suit I'd once purchased for a Nova Forge presentation I was never allowed to give. In Apex's boardroom, 6 partners waited, eyes sharp, reputations sharper. 15 minutes, Patricia said. Show us why this matters. I didn't talk about Nova Forge. I didn't mention Eli, or humiliation, or the PowerPoint teacher's sneer. I let the data sing. Live demo, real-time predictions, churn rates forecast weeks before reality caught up. They fired questions like arrows. I answered with the calm precision of someone who had already lived every line of this script once before, only in hostile territory. Finally, David Park, a senior partner with 3 unicorns behind him, asked the question that turned the air electric. Initial funding request? $2 million, I said, for 18 months, 3 key hires, and enough data to prove the model at scale. They exchanged glances, silent calculations passing like lightning across their faces. Patricia nodded once. We'll need diligence, David said. But yes, we're interested. I walked out calm, made it to the elevator, to the parking garage. Then I shook for 5 straight minutes, adrenaline leaking like a broken dam. 2 days later, Patricia called. We're in. $2 million at 12 pre. Congratulations, Lauren. Welcome to the Apex portfolio. I stared at my laptop, at the same algorithm Eli had called small thinking. On paper, Neuralink was now worth $14 million. My stake? $8.4 million. The cost of entry? $1,700. I managed only 2 words. I'm here. Good, Patricia said, because this is just the beginning. Stealth is a discipline. For 6 months, Neuralink moved in silence, a 5-person team crammed into a rented office above a taco shop in Austin. We lived on ramen, bad coffee, and adrenaline, refining an algorithm the size of an idea, but the weight of an empire. While other startups hunted headlines, we hunted accuracy. Every incremental lift mattered. 1 more percentage point in predictive certainty meant millions in potential contracts. The office was bare, but our ambition was not. Whiteboards groaned under equations, walls bloomed with sticky notes, tasks, edge cases, feature tweaks. The hum of laptops was our soundtrack, punctuated by debates over model training versus inference efficiency. We knew the stakes. When your technology claims it can see the future of user behavior, the margin of error has to shrink until it's microscopic. Then Zentria called. A $40 billion e-commerce giant, they were the whale every analytics vendor dreamed of landing. Their CTO, Margaret Liu, skipped preamble when she reached out. "We need real prediction, not retrofitted buzzwords. Can you deliver?" I swallowed the weight of the question and answered evenly, yes. The meeting in Seattle was clinical. Their engineers had tried for years to decode customer churn, abandon carts, upsell blind spots. They were skeptical, battle-hardened. We plugged Neuralink's demo into their anonymized data set. Within seconds, their jaws tightened. Our predictions didn't just line up with reality, they anticipated behaviors their own analysts had missed. 87% accuracy in forecasts. A figure that, in enterprise analytics, might as well have been sorcery. "How long for full integration?" Margaret asked. 3 months for initial deployment, 6 for full rollout. "And you guarantee these results?" "In writing. If we don't hit accuracy benchmarks, you pay nothing." She smiled, faint and sharp. "That's bold." "It's not bold," I said. "It's math." While negotiations moved forward, another story brewed back in Raleigh. Nova Forge was also wooing Zentria, waving the very banner they'd torn from my hands. Sarah from marketing, still my quiet ally, sent whispers across LinkedIn. Eli bragged about their game-changing behavioral analytics, a Frankenstein stitched from scraps Derek barely understood. By October, the shortlist was set. Oracle, Nova Forge, and Neuralink. David versus 2 Goliaths. The presentations would be head-to-head. The morning of, Seattle drizzle painted the sidewalks silver. I arrived early, navy suit pressed, hair pinned with precision. In the lobby I saw him, Eli, sneakers squeaking against marble, team orbiting him like satellites. He almost passed me by. Then recognition flared across his face like a short circuit. "Lauren?" His voice wavered between surprise and panic. "What are you doing here?" I smiled with professional calm. "Presenting to Zentria." He tried to recover swagger. "Big deal. We're pitching our behavioral analytics platform." "That's interesting," I said mildly. I thought that was PowerPoint teacher territory. The flush that climbed his neck was better than applause. Through glass walls, I watched Nova Forge present. Eli gestured broadly, his team nodding like a chorus. Their slides promised what they couldn't prove, projections stitched from half-digested ideas. Derek sat stiffly, eyes darting, sweat collecting at his temple. He knew he was drowning. Then it was my turn. I entered the conference room where 12 evaluators waited, Margaret at the head of the table, and there, at the far end, sat Eli and his team, allowed to observe. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. Once I had stood in a room as they laughed me down. Now they would watch me build the future they'd discarded. "Good morning," I began. "I'm Lauren Pierce, CEO of Neuralink. Today, I'll show you not just what users have done, but what they will do next." The demo unfolded like music. Predictions displayed in real time against Zentria's test data. Churn curves aligned to decimals. Upsell triggers mapped like a treasure chart. Accuracy, 89.3%, a number that silenced the room. Then came the question that sealed it. "Implementation cost?" their CEO, Robert Xiao, asked. $37 million over 5 years, I said. Licensing, support, guaranteed accuracy rates that rise as the system learns. Nova Forge quoted 40, someone noted. I didn't flinch. "You're not just evaluating cost, you're evaluating capability. Allow me to show you the difference." I pulled up a side-by-side. Nova Forge's clumsy predictions against Neuralink's precision. On one side, guesses dressed as graphs. On the other, certainty painted in numbers. "How soon can you start?" Robert asked. "Integration by December 1st. The committee exchanged glances. Margaret smiled. "We've seen enough. Thank you, Ms. Pierce." As I packed my laptop, I let my eyes brush past Eli. He slumped in his chair, Sneakers no longer squeaking. 12 months ago, he'd called me small. Now, he was watching the cost of his arrogance compound in real time. I paused just long enough to whisper as I passed him, $1,700. That's all I asked. The click of my heels on marble echoed like punctuation. Behind me, Margaret's voice floated. I don't think we need to deliberate long on this one. 3 days later, the contract landed. $37 million over 5 years. Performance bonuses pushing it toward $45 million. The algorithm Nova Forge had laughed out of a conference room now sat at the center of one of the largest enterprise deals in e-commerce. And Eli? He had front-row seats to the empire he'd thrown away. The ink on Zentria's contract was barely dry when the first email arrived. The subject line carried the chill of corporate intimidation. Intellectual property clarification request. Nova Forge's legal department alleged that Neuralink's platform bore substantial similarity to proprietary work developed during my tenure. Expected. That was the word I typed back to my attorney as I forwarded the message. Because I had prepared for this moment since the night I first photographed Section 3.2.4 of my employment agreement. Within hours, we drafted our reply. It was surgical, devastating, and meticulous in its citations. I attached time-stamped proposals showing development predating Nova Forge's rejection. Meeting minutes where Eli himself dismissed my idea as small thinking. Email threads documenting its rejection. And, most damningly, the very clause they had signed. Once formally rejected without financial investment, the idea was mine to pursue independently. But I didn't stop there. I added one more attachment. Nova Forge's own press release, 6 months old, where Eli had boasted about moving away from outdated analytical approaches like user behavior analysis. The irony glowed like neon. 2 hours later, the tone shifted. The next email came not from legal, but from Marcus Webb, CEO of Nova Forge. He reached for diplomacy. Perhaps we could discuss this professionally. I'm confident we can find a mutually beneficial resolution. Translation: they were cornered. Phone calls followed. Marcus's assistant, head of legal. Even Monica from HR, who once sat across from me rehearsing the line about resistance to new leadership. I let them all go to voicemail. By mid-afternoon, Patricia Yang from Apex phoned me. "They're leaning on Zentria, trying to spook them," she said, a smile in her voice. But Robert Xiao isn't buying it. In fact, he's annoyed. He wants to accelerate the announcement, make it public that Zentria chose Neuralink. Let them try to muddy the waters, I thought. They had forgotten the first rule of data: documentation beats narrative. And yet, Nova Forge wasn't done. By evening, Marcus sent a new proposal. $5 million if I signed a clarification agreement surrendering all IP developed during my employment, regardless of circumstances. $5 million. Enough to tempt someone else, maybe. But not me. I drafted my response carefully. Nova Forge explicitly rejected this proposal, as documented. True innovation requires more than recognizing good ideas. It requires nurturing them, investing in them, and respecting the people who create them. Consider this matter closed. I copied my lawyer, Patricia, and for maximum effect, Robert Xiao. The fallout was immediate. By Thursday morning, Sarah from marketing messaged me. Emergency board meeting. Marcus grilled for 3 hours. Stock down 4% after Zentria's press release. Tech blogs picked it up. E-commerce giant Zentria chooses unknown startup over established vendor. Subtext: Nova Forge had fumbled catastrophically. Then came the leak. James Chen, an accountant who rarely raised his voice, had run the numbers. His email to the board was leaked to TechCrunch. If Nova Forge had invested the $1,700 I requested, the Zentria deal alone would have netted $40 million. Factor in other clients, the opportunity cost climbed past 100 million ROI, 2,352,941%. He wrote it with an accountant's precision. This represents the single greatest failure of technology assessment in our company's history. The industry pounced. Analysts dissected the blunder. Investors whispered about negligence. And board members demanded accountability. By Saturday, the axe fell. An all-staff email announced restructuring of product innovation leadership. Eli was pursuing opportunities outside the company. His team was dissolved, redistributed to departments better aligned with their skills. But the real confession came buried in paragraph 4. We recognize that our previous approach to evaluating proposals may have overlooked valuable opportunities. Going forward, all technical suggestions will be reviewed by a diverse panel to ensure transformational ideas are not missed, regardless of their source. A bureaucratic mea culpa. But in plain English, they would never again dismiss someone just because they didn't look or sound like the visionary type. Sarah forwarded me the email with one word: beautiful. And she was right, because Nova Forge hadn't just lost Zentria or 100 million or Eli. They had lost the illusion of infallibility. They had rewritten policy, restructured leadership, and admitted in writing that my $1,700 proposal, mocked, belittled, and laughed out of a room, was the idea they should have funded all along. Corporate arrogance had become corporate autopsy, and I was just getting started. The call came on a Wednesday evening. I almost didn't answer when I saw the Raleigh area code flash across my phone, but curiosity is its own algorithm. It predicts behavior by tugging at the threads you can't quite ignore. "Lauren," the voice said, stripped of bravado. "Eli." I let the silence hang. "I owe you an apology," he continued. "Not just for the meeting, not just for the way I dismissed your work, for everything. I let my ego—" He trailed off. I was wrong. There it was. Contrition, years too late, bleeding through the line. His words stumbled where once they swaggered. He even admitted what he had told the board, that the failure was his, that the proposal had been mine alone, developed independently, and that Nova Forge had no rightful claim. For a moment I almost felt pity. Almost. "Apology noted," I said simply. He took a breath, then asked the question that revealed he hadn't fully learned the lesson. "Would you ever consider hiring me?" "No." Firm but not cruel. Neuralink requires a different kind of thinking, the kind that recognizes innovation wherever it comes from, not just from people who look like innovators. He sighed, and I could hear the truth settling in. "I understand. Good luck, Lauren." Genuinely. When the call ended, I stared at the screen for a long moment. His remorse was real, but remorse doesn't rewrite history. Innovation is about foresight, not hindsight. That same night, Patricia forwarded me a draft press release. From Zentria, partnership with Neuralink for revolutionary behavioral analytics platform. They wanted a quote from me, something about innovation. I typed slowly, carefully. True innovation doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it's a simple solution to a complex problem overlooked by those expecting something flashier. At Neuralink, we believe the best ideas can come from anywhere. The challenge is recognizing them when they appear. Professional, pointed, memorable. The ripple effects at Nova Forge deepened. Sarah messaged me again. "Marcus just announced a new role, Chief Innovation Recognition Officer. Salary 10 times what your proposal cost. Everyone knows it exists because of you." I smiled at the irony. They had built an entire job title to ensure they never again dismissed someone the way they dismissed me. My humiliation had become their institutional policy. Then came the press conference in Seattle. I stood between Robert Xiao and Margaret Liu, facing a wall of journalists and cameras. Flashes burst like fireworks as they announced the $37 million contract. One reporter asked the inevitable, "Ms. Pierce, you worked at Nova Forge for over a decade. Any comment on them losing this deal to your 6-month-old startup?" I kept my tone measured, diplomatic. Every experience shapes us. My time at Nova Forge taught me valuable lessons about innovation, particularly the importance of recognizing potential wherever it appears. I'm grateful for those lessons. Another pressed harder. Were any components of Neuralink's platform developed during your tenure there? I didn't blink. Neuralink's technology was developed independently. In fact, when I proposed an early version at Nova Forge, it was formally rejected. That rejection freed me to pursue it on my own. Sometimes a no is just the universe redirecting you toward a bigger yes. The room rippled with quiet laughter. And in the back, I caught sight of Marcus Webb, Nova Forge's CEO, watching silently. His face flickered between regret and something resembling respect. Later, as the conference wound down, Marcus approached. No entourage, no lawyers, just a tired man carrying the weight of an expensive mistake. "Congratulations, Lauren," he said. "Thank you." He studied the Neuralink banner behind me, the Zentria logo beside it. $1,700. I keep thinking about that number. Eli's coffee budget was $3,000 a month. His team's happy hours cost more than your entire proposal. I let him speak. "I reviewed your performance file after you left. 12 years, 43 documented innovations that saved or earned us millions, and we pushed you out over $1,700. "You didn't push me out," I corrected gently. "You freed me." He almost smiled. "That's gracious of you." "It's accurate. If you had funded my proposal, Neuralink would have been a Nova Forge product. But I would have stayed what Eli called me, a PowerPoint teacher. Instead, I'm a CEO building something bigger than any of us imagined." Marcus hesitated. "What would you have done differently if you were in my position?" "Listened," I said simply. "Not just to the loudest voices or the confident pitches, to the quiet innovators too busy building to play politics." He nodded slowly, the lesson etching itself into his features. Then he extended his hand. I shook it, a closure 12 years in the making. As he walked away, Margaret appeared at my elbow, smiling. "Former boss? Former limitation," I said. And with that, I turned toward the cameras, ready for the next phase. Scaling a company is nothing like building one. The first months of Neuralink had been adrenaline and sleepless nights. 5 of us chasing accuracy percentages across cheap laptops and borrowed office space. But now, with Zentria's contract signed and 3 more Fortune 500 circling, the game shifted. We needed governance, patents, safeguards, redundancies, the bones of an enterprise that would last. Patricia had warned me, the first million is proving yourself. The next 100 million is proving you can survive yourself. She was right. Suddenly, every hour mattered. We hired carefully, engineers who weren't dazzled by buzzwords, analysts who could spot noise from signal, people allergic to politics but addicted to results. I set a rule, no Eli's. We would never reward volume over vision. At home, a bottle of Dom Perignon sat unopened for weeks, a gift from Patricia. When the Zentria press release finally went live, I poured a glass and stared at the framed screenshot on my desk. Eli's email, dismissing my proposal as small thinking. Once, it had been my fuel. Now, it was just a relic. Proof that even rejection can be recycled into momentum. The industry watched with fascination. Tech blogs dubbed me the 1700 CEO. Business schools dissected the case as a study in overlooked innovation. LinkedIn flooded with connection requests, including one from Derek, the junior analyst who'd once inherited my desk. I accepted. Let him watch. Meanwhile, Nova Forge imploded. Sarah's messages painted a grim portrait. Emergency audits, demoralized teams, a board scrambling to explain to investors how a $100 million opportunity had slipped through their fingers. They created new policies, even a new executive role, but the cultural wound was too deep. Talent fled, stock dipped, and Eli's name became shorthand for arrogant blindness. For me, though, there was no victory lap, just the next sprint. Margaret pulled me aside after one late-night strategy session. Robert's already fielding calls from other giants. 3 Fortune 500s want Neuralink's platform. Are you ready to scale this? Yes, I said without hesitation, because this was no longer about revenge or redemption. It was about building something durable out of what others had discarded. One Monday morning, I stood at a podium beside Zentria's executives, cameras flashing. This partnership, their CEO declared, represents a new paradigm in customer intelligence. Then he gestured toward me. And it happened because one person saw patterns everyone else missed and had the courage to act when others laughed. Reporters fired questions. Ms. Pierce, any comment on Nova Forge? I answered evenly. Innovation doesn't die when it's rejected. Sometimes rejection is just redirection. In the back of the room, Marcus Webb stood again, silent witness to a future his company had forfeited. When our eyes met, there was no anger left in me, only clarity. That night, back in Austin, I sat at my kitchen counter with the champagne glass half full. Outside, the city hummed with the restless energy of startups dreaming of unicorns. On my desk, the cactus from Nova Forge stretched toward the light, resilient and patient. $1,700. That number had once been a punchline. Now it was legend. They laughed at my $1,700 proposal. I sold it for $37 million. The math was simple. The lesson was eternal. And this was only the beginning.